Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is December 13th, and you are listening and watching the Daily AI Show live. And today, it being Wednesday, nope, wrong screen. Wednesday means that we are talking about all the AI news that each of us thought was interesting over the last 7 days. For the most part, we have not shared with each other what we thought was interesting. So it always makes it fun for all of us because we're learning along with you guys. And there's always some AI news that I did not know about, which is amazing because I subscribe to entirely too many newsletters. And you would think I would get it all, but I always learn something extra here on the Daily AI Show. So today we have Beth, Robert, Aaron, Andy, Jimmy, I'm Brian. And I don't know, we'll see if we have Carl here pop in. Sometimes he has to pop in a minute or two later. So with all of that out of the way, who has got the juiciest, latest news that they just cannot wait to share? And here comes Carl real quick. All right, now we got everybody. We got all 7 of us today. Fantastic. All right, so who has got the juiciest piece of AI news from the last 7 days that they want to share? Go.
I think one that I read about was the fact that Europe has reached a deal on the world's first comprehensive AI rules. The European Union, so they negotiated a deal on Friday for the world's first AI rules. I think it's something we all knew was coming and probably wanted to come realistically. And then let's hope that now that our friends in Europe have started that they might sort of kickstart the program and we'll get going in other countries. But yeah, it's important stuff. And at the moment, somebody is showing the screen. It's probably got the details.
I tried to show the cheat sheet that I found that basically talks about everything. It's a good point there, Aaron. I saw that it was the penalties are kind of interesting. They have penalties of enforcement, and they're all about Europe is kind of big on this, the GDPR stuff as well, and I'm curious how we're going to follow suit as the United States, but it is interesting.
Yeah, I
Probably
mean,
lagging.
Is it financial penalties, jail penalties, or up against the wall in front of a firing squad type of penalties?
Up to 7% of global turnover for 35 million for prohibited AI violations is one of them, and it's like there's several different things.
I mean, I look at companies like Google and Facebook, and they go 35 million, pocket change. Who cares? We'll do it all the time we have to. So that's why I wonder whether it's strong enough penalties to impact big companies that are the real powerhouses in the industry.
I know I read earlier. I really haven't researched this. So I'm just asking if you guys know, but I feel like I read, as this was all coming out, that it perhaps was going to protect some of the big players and hurt some of the startups. Is that still something you guys saw in there, or were they mentioning that at all?
I remember hearing something of that in the past, because I think some of the people pushing this were from some of the big companies. But yeah, whether it's happening any further, I'm not sure.
I think they saved from an open source perspective, they required the major tech companies to reveal either they're safe, like how they're being safe with it, versus some of the open source, there's not as much requirements. So I know there's a lot of people who are pretty happy from an open source perspective saying, hey, this is great, because the fear was that the same rules that apply to the major companies would then be applied to like the smaller, like a Mistral or whatever, but then it's not. So it's actually not a bad, it's evenly distributed versus just one capture everything.
And since you just mentioned it, Carl, do you want to jump into Mistral a little bit? I know that would have definitely been in the news. It kind of piqued my interest, but do you or somebody else, do you kind of want to walk through what that is, what was announced, maybe why people are sort of excited about it?
Yeah. So briefly, Mistral is an open source model that is comparable to GPT 3.5, and their latest release, it's on the tip of my tongue, like Mistrex or whatever that was. Yeah,
Mistral 8x7B.
Yes, and they released it as a torrent, so you can just download it, that's awesome, and you can run a GPT 3.5 equivalent locally on your computer. Just download it and there you go. And
Yeah.
What's the? Go ahead.
And Ethan Malik is running it on his phone.
Yeah.
Like
And-
it's
yeah,
small enough
exactly.
that you can do lots with it.
and there's different versions of it too. Like there's I don't have it in front of me, but there's like 4 different.
Tiny,
Yeah.
medium, and yeah.
I
So
think
I
like
wanted to point out that what's distinctive about the model is it's a sparse mixture of experts, or MOE type model, which is what makes it possible to achieve the capabilities of a GPT 3.5, which is a much larger model, in such a small footprint. And there are other MOE, or mixture of experts, models out there, but this one is using that technique.
Okay.
And by the way, mixture of experts means that in this case, there's 8 separate models, but each of them is less than 1 billion, right? But the mixture of those 8 different models focused on different tasks creates a collective brain that is as effective as GPT 3.5.
Right.
Yeah,
wasn't that what GPT-4 kind of did
That's-
differently?
Yes, it
comparison.
is also a mixture of experts
Yeah.
model, but on a huge scale.
So while we're on the subject of tiny models, Microsoft also released an LLM called Phi-2, PHI-2, that is 2.7 billion. So it's the smallest of the main ones that people talk about that I've heard. Like what's notable about it is pretty much the size that definitely you could run on your phone or some small kind of device and carry with you.
Yeah, there definitely seems to be this trend. We see this through multiple news cycles as we've been doing this show, that, you know, you have 2 diverging paths. You still have like the LLMs where it's, you know, maybe GPT-5 is going to be trained on, I don't know, 4x the size of GPT-4. I don't know what it's going to be. But then you also have this sort of race to see how small and how efficient you can make these models. And then
Right.
like, I mean, it's kind of amazing to think that these type of models would be small enough to run on phones. And it kind of gives you a little bit of a peek to the future of, you know, what might be riding on an iOS or an Android or something like that. And then what that would open up in terms of on-device AI type assistance and these kind of things with the LLM. So it's really interesting because obviously it'd be multimodal. I think, you know, once you get to that level, you're going to start seeing things like taking a picture and then that LLM is able to run on the phone and instantly add captions, adjust, make edits, the things that we now have to go to individual, you know, locations for, whether it's like inside of OpenAI or maybe we have to go use this tool over there. It sounds like once it gets tiny enough and efficient enough, that's going to be really, really interesting. And I would imagine that's stuff that we will all be at least somewhat messing around with in 2024. It doesn't sound like it's terribly far away. So
That's
I think
would be a really useful app on your phone. I don't know about you guys, but my library of photos and videos is a mess. I just go snap. So if I could run a little app on the phone, figure out what everything is, catalog it, store it, put it into, I mean, that would make life real easy. I like that idea.
Right,
Right.
but it's got to compete
Right.
with the iOS app for ChatGPT, I would think. Right. So the main benefit of being able to run it on your phone is that you don't have to have an internet connection in order to do it. It's all natively in your phone. But if I have internet connection and ChatGPT can talk to me about my photos, I am likely to just open that app as opposed to one of these other things. So like they're like fighting for a market, and that's really fun to see and exciting. And I think, you know, how much of the actual market is not online.
I love the confluence or intersection of these 2 different technologies, because I feel like that is what 2024 is going to be known for. It's going to be where we have these open source models that, you know, OpenAI and everybody was kind of fumbling the ball a little bit because all the drama. And so I think honestly, that's why Mistral was able to get so much money in their recent raise. and they are the best in the open source from what I've seen. Yi and Blizzard and Mistral. So I love that open source is coming out, and I love that it's getting smaller. Like those two things. This is what we've been saying. I mean, everybody on this call, I think, would agree. When it gets on the phone, is when that's the next big leap. Is when it's now,
and the thing about smaller models is that the large population of users is not trying to develop new proteins, so they're not needing a really huge model and extended capabilities. Those very small models on your phone are going to be able to do almost everything that a typical consumer user anyway, or even business user is going to do on LLM.
And keep in mind
take a
also,
step farther.
there's lots of people around the world who can't afford the $20 US a month for ChatGPT Plus. So, there's a whole market out there for that as well.
That's a good point.
And look, smaller to mobile than smaller to Raspberry Pis, right? We can follow this path to where you have LLMs that are running on Raspberry Pis doing pretty amazing things. And now my, setting up my my Christmas lights now doesn't even require, the level of input that it would require for me to sync it if I wanted to and have one of those really cool shows. I don't. But if I had one of those really cool shows on the front of my house and it was doing Usher and Little John, which, side note, my favorite one of those that I've seen is a Christmas one of Little John in it, and the trees are singing. We'll get to that. I'll find that link and share that because that's amazing.
Where's the squirrel banner when we need it?
Yeah, I know. I was sitting there. I was heading back to the news. So we talked about some of the language models. The only one I'll bring up really quick, just because I saw it and we were talking about it, is that Anthropic, just in terms of LLMs, and we can switch topics, but I did see a thing with Anthropic, and they did a whole study. They run Claude about just the word when I read a house, discrimination. And so they actually, what the study quickly said was that they found out that when they ran the model and they were giving it scenarios and basically saying like, you're the judge essentially, and then putting race and things like that into the question, that it initially was discriminating against white non-males, right? And it even says in the article, like, yeah, you read that right, because that's the opposite of what you would expect it to say. But it was saying, the whole point of the article was saying that they actually found out by basically saying, hey, you cannot discriminate, that Claude instantly was able to basically eliminate discrimination from its future posts. So their whole point of it was, I just felt it was interesting, was they said, yes, there is discrimination, but it's actually fairly easy to eliminate it through simple prompts and stuff like that. How accurate that is or whatever, just thought I would bring it up. I found it interesting. So other news, other things we want to talk about.
I got a couple of fun ones from the science world. Number one, a few days ago, with a $75 million bump from the local billionaires of the Seattle region, they worked with UW to start up a collab, a company to work with DNA typewriters. So they use a technology called CRISPR to make some edits to DNA. But the main reason they're doing this is so that they can use DNA to store information. So we're talking writing information to DNA strains, and that could open up to immense amount of storage jumping forward into the future and things like that. So just typewriting your data instead of ones and zeros, you're typing to the AGCT of DNA. So
explain that to me. What does that do for you, Jimmy? Like, why is that a big deal?
Okay, so DNA has millions of strands of information, right? And they break it down into what the components that they call AGCT, right?
Okay.
So instead of typing a 1 and 0, which is the binary, the basic information storing for storage of memory, you can write it to the DNA. So think
Gattaca.
100, 1,000 times more data. I don't even know what the multiplier is. Yeah.
But does it have to be
DNA strands? What's that?
Does the DNA have to be alive? Like, is this writing to?
It's got to be suspended in some sort of material, but I don't think in terms of like in a living being or whatever.
That's
No,
what I'm like.
it doesn't have to do that. No. But what it is it's think the way I would the analogy I would use is, you know, how when you're making a chipset, you're looking for the process to go in the nanometers, right? The smaller and smaller the process is, the more and more you can fit on the chip. It's the same kind of process here. The more and more data or information you can store in a DNA strand.
Nice.
So I think you got to write.
That was super interesting to me.
You got to write this movie script, Jimmy. I feel like this is right up your alley.
That DNA, the DNA model is the densest information storage medium. There may be others in the future, but right now, it's estimated that a coffee mug sized collector of DNA could theoretically store all of the world's data, everything that's ever been produced.
Wow, talk about on your device.
So mildly impressive, I guess. I suppose.
The other one from the Science World stories is there some physician investigators. So this is in the medical field. They released, or they published a paper on their findings about using ChatGPT or a chatbot for probabilistic diagnostics. And essentially what that really breaks down to is when physicians are doing their diagnostics to figure out what the probability of any particular outcome using that set, they find that a chatbot can help aid that physician in calculating those probabilities, because that apparently seems to be the hardest part in doing diagnostics in the medical field, is figuring out those probabilities, and the chatbot can help a physician succeed much better in doing that. So I thought that was interesting. You know, we're seeing how AI can touch onto different, you know, facets, not just in the productivity side of things.
Nice.
Yeah. I do have a couple other stories. The big one I wanted to make sure that we cover within time is Runway's announcement of general world models, or what they're deeming general world models. And these are models that determine the environment of the world in which you are generating whatever outcome, right? So that can range from simple simulation to a much larger set of parameters and things like that. So if you have all the input of what the world is like, you know, even from simple physics to the likelihood of, you know, rain or, you know, whatever, then you can have a much better output of what you are trying to generate, whether that be a still image or a video. So that's really early days. They just released that. They're doing more research into that, but I think that will be a huge leap into things like generating AI-based video and film.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like it's kind of like taking interior decorating from having to build the house over and over each time in order to change a room and do something, to having the house set. And now you're generating things from within that environment, but that environment doesn't have to change because the house is already built.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. And, you know, knowing where the windows are and knowing how the sunlight filters in and knowing if there's circulation and all of those kinds of parameters. I think this will be a huge boon to like the video game world in a more immediate sense. I just want to see how they can integrate it with like Unity or Unreal Engine or something like that. I think that
it sounds like it would be relevant to like digital twins, you know, when you have like a massive new infrastructure project, what they'll do is like build an entire digital twin before it's produced, so they can figure out problems before it actually manifests for like manufacturing. So it sounds like it could have some maybe implications in that world too. Maybe, I'm not sure, but like the digital twin thing to me is amazing because of the layers and how you can go into it and how they can build up entire factories that do amazing thing, like for, you know, hydro and stuff, but they can see it all in a 3D model and watch the way things flow through and all that. So one to bring up too, but I mean, this is a big ones. Like this is in the category of, hey, sometimes AI is lying to you, or the companies behind it are. The big one was Gemini. Gemini was actually announced hours after our last news show last Wednesday, so it didn't get into that. Now, Gemini in itself was a big deal. There was a lot that came out about it. I think a lot of it's been in the news, so I don't want to take too much on it. But essentially, they released something right now that's like akin to 3.5. And next year, you may have something that's faster and better than 4. And of course, that's what they said was, oh, it's going to be better than GPT-4, but you won't see it till next year. Okay, fine. The big thing that they did and what really came out afterwards is they had this really amazing, highly polished video where the guy's like putting a blue duck on the video, and Gemini is responding in real time. You can see even in the video that as the hands come up and down, there's some cuts there, and their lighting is slightly different. I thought, okay, they've made some edits and cuts here. That's not unusual. Well, what really came out after that was that, oh, this is just a sort of theoretical inspiration video of what you might be able to do in the future, but also right now you can't do that. So it really, like, I mean, Carl, you talked about this. I don't want to get too much into the Gemini. I'll mention the other story too that I thought was interesting, but like just the idea of like Google, what are you doing? Like you feel, I think Carl, you said it, this is yet again where it seems like Google has been pushed, where they feel the pressure, where they feel like they have to rush to put this stuff out. And instead of just showing a live demo of what Gemini could do, which was probably good enough, they felt they need to do this highly over, produced video that's not realistic to what anybody can do. I don't know for how long. And before we could talk more about Gemini, but I'll mention the other story about the lying is that there's this story that came out about drive-thrus, fast food drive-thrus and how they were AI. And then this research people or whatever did some research and found out that, a lot of that, like 70% of that AI drive-thru are people in the Philippines, humans like backing that up. And that it's not actually AI at all. It's just cheaper labor somewhere else fixing it. And so, you go through Wendy's and you think, oh, this is cool. They have this, and I'm not picking on Wendy's. Maybe I think they mentioned Del Taco and a few others. Oh, this is cool. Look at this AI. It's, it's making this super efficient, only to find out that what the company has really done. And they said in the report, like these AI companies are definitely trying to obscure this idea that it's not actually AI, it's actually cheaper labor in another country that is doing this work. So now if you work in the fast food industry and you're worried about your job and you were worried about AI, now you also have to worry about your job being outsourced and called AI. It's a whole mess. But anyway, those two things together, as far as like what you see and what you get right now in this fast-pacing environment and world of AI, it's not, what we're seeing is not always what we think or what we're actually getting in reality. So anyway, that's what. And
if we can just look at, like, in this week, we had Mistral release by basically a torrent link, and then having like people on Twitter going like, is this real? What's happening? And talking about it all the way up to this total stylized, amazing thing. Yeah. And of course the link worked in the way that it did not say it was going to, right? It did not give any expectations. And then if you went there and you had an actual experience, that was your actual experience. The really stylized, polished promotion doesn't. And that's what we're seeing from all kinds of companies, right? Like,
yeah, the rolling wait list. So it's like, oh, here it is. It's everything slick. And I think it's even like Runway or Pika or the videos. You're like, oh my gosh, I can create this, but you have to get on a wait list. And I don't know if it's to raise your hype, but then slowly let you down like a month later. So because I was hyped, but I'm hyped, but it's not as great as I thought. And
Pika is a good example of that. I'm not as impressed with Pika as I thought I was going to be. And I feel like they did that to me. Like, if
Are
you
you
had not
in
told
too?
me, huh?
I still haven't got access to it.
Are you in too? Do you have access to Pika?
Becca, that's my coworker. Beth, I've had access for weeks. I'm like really in, but you guys, I get a lot of people that reach out to me because of this show. I don't really want to make it a deal because there's 7 of us and I get preferential treatment. But I've had access to this stuff. No, I don't. Carl is the only one I know that has access. But when I saw the like Matt Wolf and people like that do their thing, I'm like, oh, that's cool with video. And that should have been it. Like, oh, that's cool with video. But Pika had to show me all this highly curated pieces that they had done, like everybody does. And you're like, okay, well, I was expecting something cooler. And now I feel let down, but I shouldn't. I should just be like, oh, this is actually a really cool advancement in creating text to video or video to video. It should stand on its own. Like, why pump people up? Like you were saying, Carl, only to kind of let you down and be like, oh, it's
Marketing 101, Brian.
Marketing 101.
Well, you know what the thing is, though, it's a fascinating look at. To me, this is where like we're evolving from. I would say 5 years ago, 7 years ago, if Google or whoever came out with like this really slick, and Google does it everywhere because every single event I attend, they have these really slick videos, and it's like music pumping, and people who don't use AI frequently, they're jamming with it, right? But then when you peel back, you're like, wait a second, that's not available. You can't do that. That's not even scalable. And it's like, no one asks any questions because I know they feel like they're dumb if they do. And then they just leave. And I was like, and then I put my hand up and I'm like, yeah, is BART available in Canada? And silence. And I'm like, that's what I thought. love that. But that's the thing is like,
you need a banner for Carl hates Google. And you just go like,
by the way, the Google
Just move out of Canada.
so I want to. Well, I have two things. One, I wanted to, because everybody else said everything else that was in the news, but I was at the AI Summit last week, and I will say there was a lot of great vendors there that are doing things that are really awesome in the world of AI that you don't get a lot of buzz on. One of them is the company that I got this shirt from. Is AI Done Right. I actually don't know the name of the company. I just got their cool shirt. But one is
yeah, that's the other side of marketing.
I got their business card and we're going to talk. But my point is that they have technology that brings AI into the real world. For example, they worked with a food chain that would basically, when you grabbed a sandwich or inventory management, or if you, for the medical industry, they had these different pieces of medical devices on an operating table, and it would scan it and know when one has been used, and like that kind of AI integration with the world is where I think a lot of companies who can afford to pay for something like that, or large scale like franchise systems, that's going to be coming more and more as well, because it has the ability to process and the models are getting better. So just a few things like that were kind of interesting. And I don't have time to go into it, but all that to say, there's other companies out there doing stuff. But the other thing I was going to say is Sports Illustrated, as you know, they had got in trouble for writing the bad article. Well, they just recently fired their CEO because of it. Now, for those who don't know, they were writing articles with AI and actually made a fake writer. And then when they got found out, they changed all those articles to another fake writer. And I thought that was pretty interesting for a company as big as Sports Illustrated. And so,
well, now it wasn't Sports Illustrated that was doing it. They were hiring an outsourced, feed. Yeah. So it was and they got rid of that, or actually they didn't get rid of the service provider. The service provider just switched to all live humans writing for Sports Illustrated.
Wow, but the CEO did get canned for that, which is
somebody's got to take the fall, right? But that's actually a bit. I didn't know that, Robert. That's interesting to know, because I had heard about that news story and I thought, oh, that's interesting. They got their hand slapped, but obviously they felt like it was a big enough deal that somebody had to go. And if they fired the CEO, that actually elevates that story to a bigger deal than I thought it was necessarily getting, in the news world or whatever. That's really interesting. All right, I know we're sort of like we're at time or whatever, but there's been a few people I know, like Andy, you always have some super cool like AI stories. Did you have anything you want to share real quick?
I have two
we
quick
can kind
things.
of run around.
I'm always interested in the extremely rapid advancement of capabilities of both the hardware, and the models themselves. And Microsoft Research just published an advancement in the performance of GPT-4 on the MMLU. Now that's a benchmark test. It's the Massive Multitask Language Understanding Test. And so it's got a combination of all kinds of different things that the model has to perform on. And they used a prompting strategy to increase the performance of GPT-4 from the mid 80s to 90, which is a huge jump in performance. I mean, the compare themselves to each other. They're looking at, less than 1% differences in many cases on certain aspects of the model. So that was a really, really interesting thing. And the prompting strategy that they used had a lot to do with iterative improvement of the examples that are used. So there's a sort of an iteration that's used instead of a single prompt flow, and then a subsequent inference by the model. They do a sort of an iterative process. And I just saw this yesterday. So Beth, you're nodding, so I thought maybe you might know something more about the prompt strategy.
I don't. I know about as much as you do, but I do think that that what we're seeing over in a couple different arenas is the idea that the more time you give in your prompt, but the more time you give the LLM to like run through some situations, or like to do its reasoning or to redo its reasoning, right, with another set of characteristics, the better the outcomes.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to share is I like to see what the venture community and the investment community is getting interested in. And there was a $56 million raise for a company called Essential AI. Essential AI is being invested by NVIDIA and AMD and Google and some venture capital firms. Now, the venture capital firms led the round, but NVIDIA, AMD, and Google all joined in on the round. So that's a signal that this is a very important developer. Essential AI is focused on what they call the enterprise brain. And so they're focused on enterprise data analysis and workflow automations. So imagine supply chain, advancements, but with a very, very sophisticated brain that's looking at all the flows of information in a large enterprise, and then figuring out what can be automated and doing it itself. That's what I imagine about that. But it's for all those people who are right now trying to help small and medium business with enterprise workflows using automations and large language models. This is the big dog. Essential AI. They've got huge money and they're focused on that task.
Nice.
Speaking of money, just quickly, I didn't even realize this, but Brian, you're a bit of a fan of Leonardo, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't know it was actually an Australian company, a Sydney company. So they just got a
I didn't know either.
Yeah, so they just raised $31 million for their latest funding round, which is pretty cool. So interesting to see where that progresses as time goes on.
The 10 seconds I'll add to that is when I read that too, is that I had noticed with Leonardo, I'm a fan of Leonardo. I really love him, but theirs was more about like character development in games. And when you really looked at all the stuff being developed, that definitely months ago seemed to be where their focus was. But they actually just said they're trying to expand into enterprise and B2B and things like that. And that's where their market that they think they're going as far as a business model. So it'd be really interesting to see, because Leonardo is amazing. You have all the tools and the bells and the whistles, and you can tweak knobs all day long in there to really create amazing stuff. You can now sketch, and it'll take your sketch and turn it into an actual drawing. They're up there with all the other major image players. So I'm really interested to see as they expand their offerings and they move beyond sort of this niche window of like gaming characters and stuff, which is great to see where they go in 2024. And obviously this investment should help them with that. But really cool that they're in Australia. Now I can say Canva and Leonardo, because I'm always saying like, the big Australian companies, as if there were only two in Australia.
That means I have to give them some money now.
So while we're talking about image generators, Midjourney is moving off of Discord, or like they've released their websites for creators who have made 10,000 images or more. So it's no longer in beta. It's not available to everyone. They're starting with this, so they're ramping it up. But probably in the next week or two, people who are using Midjourney will be able to generate images from the website.
I'll be interested to see if they make any changes to the interface in terms of better being able to define your image like you can with some of the.
So that's version 6, right? So that's also happening, but they're not. To my knowledge, they're not identical.
Okay, cool.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap it up for today. So join us for tomorrow for another session of the Daily AI Show. So everyone, have a great day, and we'll see you later.
Bye.
Aloha.